Hi, I'm Billy. And welcome to Jack of Trades. In this video, we will learn how to install Laravel Sanctum and use the package to generate an access token after authenticating users. As you can see, most single-page applications require an API to handle the backend logic of your software. The backend software is the one that will communicate with the database and perform the business logic of your software. And we can quickly achieve this goal by creating a REST API as our backend software. REST APIs are language agnostic. Meaning? REST APIs do not care what type of programming language the external software is using. Even if you create your REST API using the PHP language, the software you built using Python, C# or JavaScript will still be able to communicate with your API. REST APIs have standard methods like get, post, put, patch, and delete to identify the external software's type of actions. It's tough to grasp this concept for most beginners right now, but I assure you that this will make sense once we get into the application part. I believe the best way to learn computer programming is to see it in action. For example, if you have watched the other programming series on this channel, like the Livewire tutorial I created, you will realize that the software we are building is only available on desktop browsers. But when you think about it, we still do not know how to make our software available as a phone app. That is why we need to build an API so that the backend logic of our system will also be available on other devices, and we can make the same functionality even if we do not use PHP as the programming language. We know that most software systems need to have a feature that allows them to identify the authenticity of a user that utilizes them. Thus, the reason why we always see enterprise applications having the features like login, logout, and register. And we will build these standard features quickly by utilizing the pre-written functions of Laravel Sanctum. And without further ado, let's jump right into it. First, let's install the Laravel installer on our computer via Composer Dependency Manager. To those who have not installed the Composer application yet, you can check the link in the description below. Just in case you are new to Composer. Well, Composer is a type of application that manages the dependencies of your PHP projects. Dependencies is another term we call for libraries or codes that are needed by our application to run. For example, when we download source codes from the internet from other developers, and we use the source codes for our projects. Those codes are technically called dependencies because our application depends on them to complete the feature or functionality that we want to create. And with Composer, it's easier to manage and download the source codes from other developers instead of downloading the source codes manually. Now, let's create a new Laravel application for our mini project by running the command Laravel new Laravel API. As you can see, when you install a new Laravel application, it downloads all the dependencies that are needed to complete your Laravel application. Composer helps install this easily by just copy and pasting the commands to our command line interface. Let's open our Visual Studio Code editor and open a terminal there. After that, we are going to install Laravel Sanctum. Laravel Sanctum is another dependency that we need to install in our Laravel project. So let's install that by running Composer require Laravel/Sanctum. According to the Laravel documentation, Laravel Sanctum provides an authentication system for single-page applications, mobile applications, and simple, token-based APIs. Thus, the reason why we are going to use Laravel Sanctum in our REST API application. Next, let's run another command to publish the configuration and migration files for Laravel Sanctum. And then run the database migration. But before that, let's update the migration file of the users table and add the first name and the last name fields. It's up to you if you want to change this or not. After that, run the PHP artisan migrate to generate all the database tables. Now, let's create the login and logout endpoints by creating a controller for each of their logic. We're going to separate under the API folder to distinguish that these controllers belong to the API logic. And since we're planning to utilize Sanctum for our single page application, we need to uncomment this part on the app.php kernel file. Then let's go to our app routes folder, open the api.php file, and add the actual endpoint for the login functionality. Through endpoints, we are able to run the functions when working with REST APIs. Endpoints are just URLs from the REST API that allow us to run a specific function from REST API itself. In this case, the login endpoint that we are planning to create will only have the ability to make the users log into their accounts. In this case, we are using the route post because we expect a post method when a login event is happening. So the first parameter is the endpoint, and the next parameter is controller class targeting the index function. For this instance, it's appropriate to use the post method for the login endpoint because we are trying to send data to the server. The data that we're going to send later is the email and password that we're going to validate. In this function, let's make a sample return array data for the response. We will update this function later to complete the logic for our login endpoint. We are aware that we have not yet created the single page app to utilize this REST API. So for us to test this, we will use a free software application called Postman. I will also put the link in the description below to download the software application. Postman app lets us freely test our REST API by letting us manually create requests to our API. So let's go ahead and test the login endpoint that we just created. Remember that we use the Postman app to simulate an HTTP request. An HTTP request has many parts. And as you can see in the video, we are focusing on the body tab. That is because when sending data to the server via form or API calls, we normally put the data in the request body. Think of the HTTP request as an associative array. And the body is one of the keys of the HTTP request array where the data that we send to the server resides. So when the server tries to access the data that we send, it will automatically know where to look for. Now that we see that it's working, let's create the actual logic for our login endpoint. First, let's try to test if the request body is being passed. In this situation, we expect that the email and password we put will display. To actually check the login functionality, we need to create users manually. So, let's go ahead and create a seeder for users. Seeders are just another fancy name for a class in Laravel, which we use to manually insert data in our database tables. So, in this case, we will create a seeder that lets us create a random user to our database users table. Seeders can be run in the command line interface. So using seeders is a great approach when trying to test data in the development stage. Once you finish creating it, you can run it anytime via command line when necessary. Our goal for this users table seeder is to create a dummy user with fake information. Using this approach, we don't have to manually create a user on the phpMyAdmin. We just simply run the users table seeder. You can create more seeders for your project if you want to have test data. In this example, we will use the Faker library to generate fake names and other information for our users. Just follow along and copy the necessary classes to instantiate the Faker class. And it's important to know that anything we put inside the run function will be the code to execute when we run the seeder in the command line interface. In this case, we are using the facade DB class in Laravel. For the password part, we also need to hash it when we auto-generate fake users to our users database table. Hashing is another technique for securing password information. Because when somebody tries to hack your database system, they cannot easily read your users' passwords, as they are encrypted. Since it's almost impossible to decrypt the already hashed password, we need to add a static password here. In our case, we use the Jack of Traits word. Later, you will see the hashed version or the encrypted version of this password in the database. And then, let's use this user's info to log into our application using the login endpoint. Of course, we're still going to use the Postman app to simulate the request. Let's try to complete the logic of our login controller. The first thing we need to do here is retrieving the user info based on the inputted email from the request. To show us an example, let's just try to display the email, first name, and the last name of the user that we have successfully retrieved. In this way, we will know that we have genuinely retrieved the specific user from the database. It's also a good sign that the user is an existing user in our application. And then, we're going to compare the password. We all know that the password in the user's database table has already been hashed. So the only thing that we can do now is use the hash check function in Laravel to compare the password that we have supplied from the request and the password from the user's database table that has already been hashed. And if they didn't match, we will display a response saying that the password is incorrect. You can invent the structure of the response that you want, or you can just copy what I am doing. The most common response for REST APIs is JSON data format. We use JSON data format, as it is easy for both humans and machines to read its contents. That is why JSON has become a standard for REST APIs, as it allows more accessible storage and transmission of data to different web applications and servers. Second, we need to make the email and password required. So we need to make a custom Laravel validation. Just follow along, and you're good to go. For the email part, we need to make sure that it is also a valid email. After that, we will check if the validator returns a fail. If it fails, we will return a response for the error. You can create your custom response here. The most important thing is that you clearly deliver the message of the error. Also, you should check the most common status codes that are appropriate for the response. Many articles on the internet that you can refer to for the status code. Just Google them, and I'm sure you will find them quickly. Third, if everything is successful, then we can safely return an access token for the response. The access token serves as the authentication element that we need to pass to the API if we create other functionalities, such as adding, updating, deleting users, and many more. Also, the access token is a way of authenticating the users allowed to access the application. The single-page applications are the ones that will save the access tokens in a cookie or local storage and are revoked after the user logs out or closes the browser. For beginners, you will appreciate what the access token does when we create our single-page application later in this series. But for now, let's focus on developing these primary endpoints. As you can see here in the Personal Access Tokens table, the access token was safely recorded, thanks to Laravel Sanctum. After this, we will implement a simple logout feature. Now, let's create the logic for the logout feature. You will be surprised by how simple it is to implement. Also, it is vital to put the logout endpoint inside the route group with middleware auth Sanctum, as the logout endpoint is expected to be accessed when the user is currently logged in. In the same manner, we put the endpoint for the logout at the first parameter, and the controller class targeting the index function. Remember that this part right here is the function name. If we try to change the function name like this, we also have to change the function name that is added as a parameter in the resource, api.php file. Now, let's test this out. Keep in mind that when testing it in Postman, you need to pass the access token under bearer token option. Don't worry, we will implement this via the single-page application that we'll build later so you can better understand this. For now, we're just using Postman to simulate a proper REST API request. Also, please don't forget to add this as an exception under the app, HTTP, middleware folder, verify CSRF token PHP file in order for our single page apps to freely access the API endpoints. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, comment, share, and subscribe if you're new to this channel. Don't forget to hit that notification bell so you'll get notified whenever a new video is up. Stay tuned, and see you in the next video.